Welcome to Make It Plain from Make Plain Jesus Ministries, featuring Pastor James Bryan, where we take biblical truths in everyday situations and break them down to be as plain as possible. So, stay tuned and enjoy the broadcast.
Well, welcome everybody. I am glad that we're having this opportunity once again to just share some truths that will help you through your life. And in this particular episode, we have something else that we're going to focus on. And I'm just excited to be here with you. And so no matter whether you are driving in your vehicle, taking a lunch break and listening to this, or starting your day off with a truth that will help you, I'm honored to be able to do this with you. My name is James Bryan. I'm your host for the Make It Plain broadcast. And we're excited to be able to, just understand how these truths are there that we can apply that will also encourage you and that you can share with so many other people. Oftentimes we go through life, or as some people would say, we're doing life, but we let life itself, whatever comes, just guide us in whatever direction we need to go in or whatever directions it's pushing us in. But I would even encourage you that that may not be the best way of addressing life circumstances. I would even propose to you that really it's part of living a purposeful life, a purpose-driven life. And so there's some things you need to bend with in life, but there are certain things that you are focused on achieving and doing. And so as a result, you have a purpose for living, you have a purpose for achieving, and that leads to what I would call a very productive life. But there's situations that arise that we sometimes have to address or sometimes have to deal with, right? And today I want to just focus specifically on what happens when you don't fit in. Or let me change it this way. Let me be very specific. When you don't fit in. And the reason why I changed it to be very specific is there will be situations in your life that no matter what you do for a living, no matter what part of the globe you live in, that you just don't fit in with the group that you are either associated with through work or in your community or just some other groupings that you're associated with. You kind of feel like you're there, but you're not really a part of it, or you're there, but it's just not gelling the way it should. And all of us, if you think about it, have come across those times. And so the question becomes, what do you do in those situations? How do you handle it? And so when these things happen, you have to figure out how to best get through it and how do you get the most out of those scenarios to whatever extent that is. I want you to know there may be times that, unfortunately, you could be in a church and you just don't really fit in. But it may be that even though you are a Christian, you may find out that the flow in that particular local church may not be the same as the flow that you're used to. And so you have to make some decisions there. But also in your communities, you may move into one that looks great on the outside. But when you're there, you kind of feel like, okay, there's no one here that I can truly relate to. So how do I deal with that? I want you to know that just because those things happen, that doesn't mean that you are necessarily some person that's, from Mars or from the moon or someplace that's strange. It could just mean that your interests don't necessarily align with those that are around you. So let's talk about that a little bit more. I know from a personal perspective, there have been times that I've been in certain groups, and the groups weren't bad or anything, but it's just that their real focus in how they were doing business was just very different from what I was accustomed to. And so I had to make some decisions as to what do I do about that? I'm not necessarily trying to say that they're wrong or anything like that. I just had to look inside to see whether I should adapt to what they're doing, that I should just be just like everyone else, or is that a problem for me? And so in the cases where there's something that I agree with and I can learn from, and everything else I would, kind of adapt with that, but still have my own uniquenesses there. But in the cases where there are things that folks were doing, even for a good cause, but it's just that the way it was being done, or the way it wasn't being done well, or their standard of how to go about it wasn't quite where I thought it should be, then in those cases I would support from afar. And so I had to figure out in every case in my life when those things arose, which direction I was going to take. I'm sure that you can think of situations in your places of employment where you have worked, or maybe you didn't quite hit it off with everyone else, not because you were being a disruptive force, but more that the personalities or the goals that were set were not the same across the board, and folks were not guided in the same way. I remember at one time there was a large organization I worked for, and in it was a organization where you worked for every penny that you earned. They paid well, but they worked you hard, and everything was because of the market that we were in. Production, you had to produce quickly. You had to do the all-nighters when it was necessary. You had to do whatever it took, and they would celebrate after each one. But boy, oh boy, did you put in the hours. And so there were certain times when, there were people from many different backgrounds, interests, areas, and all. And if you took them all outside separately and just say you want to hang out, you probably wouldn't have them all hang out because their interests were so different. But the leader of that organization did one great thing that I can say, not that anything else was bad, but he was able to galvanize the interest, or bring together the interest of everybody that was there, and just say, this is our goal. We have to get to this level, and we have to beat out these other organizations to get that market share. And the way this person communicated kind of, I guess, energized everyone that was there, to the extent it was almost like there was a cheerleading session, even though it wasn't, but it kind of resulted in that. And then everybody had this focus of the company, and success. And so they all put aside their individual differences because they had this greater goal they were focusing on. And they really worked hard, including myself, put in tremendous hours, and were able to achieve some great, magnificent goals at that time. That's an example of how a leader can actually influence people that are very different and eclectic, and bring them together in those skill sets to make them work as one. But when we look at it from a personal view, what are some of the things that you might think about that you can actually do to actually make things better? If you feel at times that your interests aren't being heard, what do you do? If you feel at times the things that they want to talk about, meaning those that are around you, are really things you're not interested in at all, how do you handle it? If you think about it even more, what do you do when you've got extra time and everybody else is going out for a coffee or a happy hour or whatever they're doing, but you're not invited? What do you do? Let me give you some thoughts and some things to consider in those scenarios, and how you might be able to handle these things. Hopefully, you've already thought of all of these plus more. But I want to be able to give you a few nuggets that may be able to help you deal with these situations. First of all, I want you to know that whenever these situations arise, you are not the first and only person that's ever experienced it. Don't feel like, woe is me, and I'm the only one that's ever gone through this before. That's not how it works. Everybody has those moments, no matter how famous you are, wealthy, independent, whatever. You have those moments. So once you know that, you can begin to deal with things a little bit better, because you realize that this is part of life. And these are things that you have to be able to do. So when people are around and they're talking about different things, and you come by the kitchen or the vending machines where everybody is, or someone's desk where everyone is, and you just don't seem to fit in, or they ignore you during the conversations, I would suggest trying to listen closely of what they're saying, and then see if there's something you can contribute to the conversation. Something positive, as opposed to just totally ignoring them or frowning in your face or just saying, I don't want to be involved in anything that you're talking about. I would say instead, just trying to see if there's something that you can contribute positively to the conversation. Is there some value that may be a different angle they didn't think about? Is there something that they're discussing that you could add that would kind of help them? Even if that person is not necessarily the most friendly person at the focal point, you still may be able to add something because you're still part of that same group or that same company or something along those lines. If it turns out also that they're coming to celebrate something that you really didn't have any part in, but they're celebrating it, meaning that they had some success or a great idea, join the celebration if it's something of value to the organization. If it's something that is beneficial, join the celebration and give thanks. You don't have to stand there and say, rah, 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 let me lead the cheer. But at least you're expressing your warm congratulations to each and every one of the folks that were involved. You never know, these little things will have an impact on folks, and they'll remember at a later time. So I would say think about that. And so that way you don't feel like you don't fit in as well. But there are times that have come up where no matter what you do, you really just don't fit in. And you may be in an environment where the folks that are there just seem to ignore you and don't pay attention to your contributions or your ideas, or just say, we've always done it this way, so I don't want to hear about anything new. It's always been this way. A couple of things I'm going to say to you is, first of all, make sure you realize who you are, meaning what you bring to the table. And I'm not saying in a boastful way. I'm not saying to go around and tell everybody that you're the best thing since sliced bread, that if it wasn't for you, these other organizations would never have succeeded, even though it could be true. But you don't need to boast about that. But understand your value, what you're bringing to the table. So be confident in that. Secondly, just make sure that you are working from the standpoint of doing everything that you're supposed to do, plus more. Always exceed what it is the expectations are set for your role or your position or your involvement. That's just a good way of doing it. And making sure that they can't talk about the negative production or anything like that, because everything you're doing is positive production. If you're a Christian, I'm going to say this. Remember, it says that all things work together for the good, right? All things work together for the good for those that are in Christ Jesus. Just understand that. Just understand it'll work out for you. Just make sure you know you're doing what you're supposed to do, and understand you have favor. So do what you know you're supposed to do, and you'll see eventually, it may not come as quick as you want, but eventually it will work out, and you'll see that, wow, this is really good. And so you have that confidence in knowing that. Don't dwell on, well, they don't like my hair, they don't like my personality, they don't like my write-up. Only thing you do is work even more diligently. Third thing I would say is, if it seems like you don't fit in, even like your boss or someone who's in charge really dismisses everything, I would say just have a conversation with them, one-on-one, non-confrontational. Get to the point of just saying, look, I'm trying this, I'm trying that. What are the concerns that you have? And based on the standards, I've met them. So what things would you like to see? What types of improvement? You can do it behind closed doors, because what that does, it allows you to just have a civil conversation. If you're doing it in front of many people, then you can't really have a conversation because they have to project a certain image and you don't get the results that you want. And you may say, but they are not giving me the recognition that I deserve and so on. I would suggest to you, and you don't have to agree with me here, but I would suggest to you that you make sure that the things that you're supposed to do, you're doing, and you can easily document how well you've done in these areas, and then let things fall where they fall. Eventually, you will get that recognition or the reward or that increase or that promotion. That's how it really works. And so, even though somebody may try to take something away or not give you your due at one time, eventually everything that you deserve will come, or everything that the Lord has for you will come. So don't stress over that, but just make sure you're doing everything that you're supposed to do and that you're doing it well. And then I would say this, I would spend your extra time, let me say it this way. I would spend your time or extra time continuing to learn, continuing to grow, continuing to just listen to other people on your teams. They may have different views or different experiences, or they may have other skill sets that you can glean from, that you can learn from. And then you can understand how to put things together even more. Get a chance to know everyone else. And I would say even some of the folks who may not necessarily give you your due or maybe ignoring you and things like that, if you pull them aside one-on-one and begin to get them to not be defensive one-on-one, over time, you might find that they begin to see you very differently, and that they begin to get to the point of saying, well, I really shouldn't ignore them like I have, and they might start including you. Your goal is not necessarily to be the most fun person with the most friends around. That's not the issue. But it's that respect that you want to have over time to the extent that you can. Now, I know I hear some people, I'm sure, that are probably saying, well, I've done all that and these people still don't acknowledge or respect what I'm doing. Well, there are those situations that do occur. You have to know that you know and be confident in who you are and your ability about what you produce. And you make sure that you continue to do excellent work no matter what anyone else says. And then as the opportunities arise, you move where you need to move. Maybe there's a different position. But you make sure that everything you have control over and every bit of work that you produce is really above expectations so that no one can say anything negative about your work. I've talked to several people in prior generations to me, and in some of the situations they grew up in, they always said they made sure that they learned to do everything that needed to be done and do it better than anyone else, so that there would be nothing that anyone can point to that would be a reason for them to be denied promotions, be denied positions, be denied opportunities. We have to think about it that way. We just need to do what we have and do it well, what skills we have, what abilities we have, and we need to make sure that it's done exceptionally well, and in that way, we'll be able to not worry about whether or not people like us or not. I want to say this, not everybody's going to like you. Not everybody's going to like your personality. But what you have to be able to do is find a way to be able to work together or to achieve a certain goal together. One other point I want to make too, and I alluded to it earlier, but I want you to think about this. Whenever you come together with people that are different from you in whatever category you want to use, you got to see if there's some common area that you have interest in, and then focus on those common areas, and you can build a connection that way. Too often right now, I think and I believe that people are just looking only at differences. But what are the commonalities that can be used and allow people that are very different to come together and work in a good manner to produce a mutually desired outcome? What are some of the things you can do at your place of employment, at your church, in your community? What are some of the things that you can do, even within families? Because the truth is, there's some families where one member just doesn't really feel like they're a part of it. And so in order to make sure that there is some cohesion, well, what are some of the similar things that you have in common? Besides just blood as a family member, what else can you really focus on? And that's what you do. This becomes extremely important in family gatherings like Thanksgiving or whether it's Christmas season or some other time when you come together, birthdays, and you see all family members from different parts and maybe not your most friendly one or the one that you're closest to. Then you use that particular understanding. Well, what can we talk about? Maybe it's just a sports team, or maybe it's something that a hobby that you all like. It's something that you've all remembered or love to do. And then let that be good, because then that gives you more of a fun, peaceful gathering that is fulfilling. And when you find those commonalities, then you're able to make progress. You're able to do some good things. You're able to understand that, really it isn't about all the divisions, but instead it's about some of the common points, the things that we can really focus on, and then we can achieve so much together. Really, we have to remember, no matter our background, we're better together than we are apart. And so when we do all those things, we realize that, we do have some great things to look forward to. But still, thinking about this, when you don't fit in, you have to understand that there are those points that come up. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you are an alien or anything like that. But what it means is that you may have to look at things a little bit differently. But you never compromise your morals. You never compromise those things. So within that particular context, then you figure out, well, how can you work together? Well, some people who are very true to their faith and really want to live that Christian life say, well, I can't hang with people that aren't Christian. Well, if you're in a workplace and you're trying to get things done, you're there to work anyway. And so you let your light shine through your work and everything else, but you're working with people regardless of background. I've had pleasures in working in many places where people have come from literally all over the world. To me, it was fun. Yes, everyone had different interests and different backgrounds and beliefs, but everybody was a person, right? And we found common areas to work with, and we encouraged each other. We made sure that we looked out for each other. One of the, there's a gentleman, I won't put his name out, but really good guy. And, our faith is very different, very, very different. But we got along so well, and every once in a while we still keep in contact, even though we haven't worked together for years. And he always wants to make sure I'm doing well, and vice versa. And we have genuinely care about one another. And we found common ground that we like to spend time together when we can. And so it is such a wonderful thing. When I think about his name, a smile comes to my face. Hopefully the same works from his view. And there are other folks that we worked in when we were on that team together that had different beliefs than the two of us did. But yet we were able to come together and get some wonderful things done. So when you think about not really fitting in, don't think about yourself as a victim. Think about, how am I going to still achieve what needs to be done? And how will I get the fulfillment that I want out of this opportunity, whatever that may be? You may say that's impossible based on the way things are, but I would tell you that all things are possible to him who believes. So go in there with that positive attitude and knowing that there's someone greater that's there to help you through all of it. Have that attitude and knowing that he can make it all new for you. He can make it all wonderful. He can make it such that you're succeeding and people wonder how. But you look at it from that perspective, knowing that all things are possible, and going with a good attitude no matter what happens. And in the end, you'll be successful. So hopefully these nuggets are good things that you can use. Hopefully this is productive for you. Hopefully you can apply it. I believe you can. And I believe you'll find that it'll change the way that your days go, your life goes. And so if this is really helpful, I want you to share with other folks that, the things that you learned and get them to tune in. And until next time, God bless. We hope to hear you soon or from you soon by communicating with us. And hopefully you're listening to us real soon.